people now. Small brother, everybody get together. Try to love one another right now. Dude, Miss Jan, you are talking about one of my most favorite people in the whole wide world.
Awesome.
I did a deep dive into Ruby Bridges and things she's done later on in her life about a year ago. Just what an incredible human being.
And she's still with us.
Dude, yeah.
Which is really cool.
And still fighting the good fight. I'd like to tell you, there's a woman in my Sunday school class, Dr. Linda Lane, and she's an incredible woman. She's a black woman, and she said, somebody said to her, how do you feel about Juneteenth becoming a holiday?
Yeah.
And she's a person of faith, and she said, you know what? I am grateful, but I am not yet satisfied. And I thought, wow, that is so. Isn't that how we all are?
Yeah.
We do make strides. You know what I'm saying? And we can be grateful for those strides and grateful for wonderful things like Juneteenth being a national holiday now. Right. But we're not yet satisfied because there's still so much to work on.
There's so much work to do.
So we're grateful.
Yes.
And I just thought, oh, Miss Linda, that's a wonderful quote. May I steal that? And I didn't ask her, but I stole it anyway because I think a lot of us are stealing it, from our Sunday school class.
Yeah.
So tell us about Ruby.
Ruby Bridges. Brave little Ruby. Ruby Bridges is celebrated for something that should have been completely ordinary. She was a first grader, and she went to school. But she was also an African-American child living in the South at a time when black people were not allowed to attend the same schools as white people. Ruby was one of the first and youngest students to challenge this injustice. Here we go. Ruby was born in Mississippi in 1954. When she was 4 years old, her parents moved to the city of New Orleans, Louisiana. But Ruby spent her summers on her grandparents' farm. As sharecroppers, her grandparents worked hard to grow food to feed their families, and Ruby and her cousins helped. They picked beans and cucumbers, and they cooked and canned the vegetables for the winter. Those were good summers, and Ruby's grandmother always made her feel special.
That's cool.
Yeah. In New Orleans, Ruby's family rented an apartment in a rooming house. Everyone on her block was black. Many of the families had also come from farms in Mississippi or Louisiana, hoping to make a better living than in the city. All the children in Ruby's family shared a bedroom.
Whoa.
Imagine that. Yes.
Yeah.
Eventually, her family had 8 kids.
Wow.
So, it got pretty crowded.
Yeah.
Ruby's favorite part of the house was the kitchen because she loved her mom's cooking. Bacon, eggs, and grits, homemade biscuits, fried catfish, and best of all, banana pudding and sweet potato pie.
Wow.
I have to admit, I love sweet potato pie.
I'm hungry.
Ruby and all the other neighborhood kids had fun together, jumping rope, playing jacks, climbing trees, or playing softball. But Ruby and her siblings had chores too, and their mom was strict. When she told us to do something, we were supposed to say, "Yes, ma'am," and not too much else about it, Ruby later wrote. In 1960, when Ruby was about to start first grade, the civil rights movement was demanding equality for African Americans. One important part of that struggle involved challenging policies and laws that required black students to attend different schools than white students. 6 years earlier, the year Ruby was born, the U.S. Supreme Court had ordered an end to segregated schools, stating that all children had a right to attend their local public school. But in the South, some states ignored the court's decision. They continued to allow separate schools for white children and black children, and the schools for white students were better funded and had more resources. In New Orleans, the school board gave an entrance exam to the black children to see if they could attend a white school. The test was hard. The officials wanted the children to fail, but Ruby Bridges and 5 others passed. So, the summer before Ruby was to start first grade, members of the NAACP, that's National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, came to talk to her parents. They wanted Ruby to attend a white school. They said she would get a better education and that it would help the other black children in the future. Ruby's dad worried that it was too dangerous, and he didn't believe Ruby would ever be treated equally. But Ruby's mother thought it was worth the risk. Ruby was special, she later recalled. I wanted her to have a good education so she could get a good job when she grew up. Ruby's parents agreed to let her attend William Frantz School. Of the black students who had passed the test, 2 decided to stay at their old school, 3 were sent to a different school, McDonough number 19, and became known as the McDonough 3. Ruby was going to attend her new school all alone. Its only black student. When September came, Louisiana lawmakers were still fighting against the court decision and passing new laws against integration. The governor even threatened to close all the schools in the state. He said he'd rather go to jail than let black children go to school with white children. But the federal judge struck down the new laws and ordered school integration to move ahead. On the morning of November 14th, 1960, Ruby's mother dressed her in a starched white dress and tied a white ribbon in her hair. She told Ruby that people might be waiting for her outside the school. You don't need to be afraid, she said. I'll be with you. 4 men in suits arrived at Ruby's house. They were federal marshals, and they were there to drive Ruby to school, which was only 5 blocks away. The marshals explained that they would surround Ruby and her mother on their walk from the car to the school. Just walk straight ahead and don't look back, they instructed. As they approached the school, Ruby saw lots of people. She thought maybe it was a festival, like Mardi Gras. It was noisy, and they passed through the crowd. She clutched her mother's hand. White people, adults and children alike, shouted, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate. When Ruby reached the school steps, she spotted police officers in gold-striped uniforms, black boots, and white helmets. This must be an important place, Ruby thought. The police officers and the big crowd made her think that perhaps she was going to college. Inside the school, Ruby and her mom were taken straight to the principal's office. The marshals guarded the door. White parents rushed into the school and pulled their children out of their classrooms. They didn't want them going to school with the black child.
You gotta pray for those people, because there's something really wrong with them.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Something really wrong with that kind of thinking.
Ruby didn't know what was going on. All day long, she just sat and waited. When 3 o'clock finally came, she was happy to leave. But outside, the crowd had grown much larger. They'd pushed past the barricade, and they were shouting horrible things. Worst of all, someone was carrying a coffin with a black doll in it. Ruby didn't understand what was happening, but she was frightened. Back at her home, the police had set up barricades at either side of the street. They only let people who lived there to pass, so Ruby could still go outside and play. She taught her friend the chant she heard, 2, 4, 6, 8, we don't want to integrate. They skipped rope to it, not knowing what the words meant. When her dad came home, he'd already heard the news about the school protests. He called her his brave little Ruby. And Ruby had to be very brave. The next day, the crowd of angry, hostile white people was waiting. They shouted racist slurs. One woman screamed at Ruby that she was going to poison her. Isn't that horrible?
It makes you think. I don't blame Ruby for. I mean, she didn't know what that chant meant.
Yeah.
But what arrogance to think that, like. I mean, who's to say that would Ruby want to go to school with families such as those,
right,
who had not families such as those, but people who held those beliefs?
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it's interesting because I've read how one of the things that in 1954, as you said, like Brown versus the Board of Education, they decided that, they were going to integrate the schools, right? But that's the assumption that the white schools were better than the black schools. So already there's an assumption that what's white is better.
Right.
And many of the students, what they did not do is they did not integrate the teachers. They should have integrated the teachers. And when you look back on it and you read like studies and you talk about people who were teachers and who were children who were part of this integration thing, it should have been the teachers first, because then you took black children, African American children, put them in with some white teachers who were under this delusion of white supremacy, which I like to call white cowardice. Nikki Giovanni says call it white cowardice. And it's very interesting because there's the assumption that white is better.
Right.
And so I understand Ruby Bridges. I know you didn't mean it. You didn't understand and those people said it in a very hateful way. 2468, we don't want to integrate, and that's disgusting. But you know what? Guess what? Maybe we don't want to integrate with you either. You know what I mean? If you guys it could go both ways. Don't assume everybody wants a part of your white wonderful life.
Right. Well, she had no idea.
She had no idea. Right. But I'm just saying, like, that assumption. That assumption that white is better and supreme is at the heart of the evil, I think. That because people are created equally and people are to be treated as such. Yes. And that is why these are wonderful things that have happened, and it scares me today that I see perhaps a turning back of some of this. Of the ways that we've come, but we have to remember that everyone is created equally and deserves respect, and no one is above anyone else, certainly not because of the color of their skin.
Right. Yes, you're right.
I get so sad. Sorry, and that's the preacher coming out of me in
don't
this.
Be sorry. It is very sad.
It's heartbreaking and it's gross. It's gross.
Yeah. That's why we need to keep.
That's why we need to keep putting people. You have some wonderful resources here about Ruby Bridges.
Oh, I wanted to mention too. This one might look familiar to you because we already saw this one. Rosa Parks.
Yes, indeed.
And Ruby Bridges are in the same little book here.
Indeed.
So.
And that, it's just, and those books down there, they're by Chelsea Clinton, the former President Clinton's daughter.
Right.
Chelsea Clinton, and they tell a bunch of different stories like that book. Those are wonderful, but my gosh, these are just fantastic. That threw my eyes. But I digress because I'm taking you away from the book here, and I want to hear the rest of the story. And I am just sorry, but I think it's important for us to cause that good trouble and to stand up for what is right and what is fair. Yes.
Okay, now I don't know where
I can't remember. I think. Yeah. One woman screamed.
And said they were going to poison her. What a horrible thing to anybody, and much less a young child.
And we need to continue. It's a horrible thing, but we need to continue to tell those stories, because if we paint this as if it never happened, then we're doomed to repeat it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Inside, a young white teacher named Mrs. Henry met Ruby. Week after week, Ruby spent her school days with Mrs. Henry. Just the two of them, because none of the white students came to class. Ruby thought it was strange to be the only child in class, but Mrs. Henry was kind, and they had fun learning and playing together. Ruby wasn't allowed to eat in the cafeteria with the other students. She couldn't go outside to play at recess, so she and Mrs. Henry moved the desks and did jumping jacks. When Ruby had to go to the bathroom, federal marshals escorted her. Can you imagine this poor little girl?
I can't.
Having to be escorted by these ginormous men, I'm sure, federal marshals. Well, that's an assumption on my case.
But I bet it's true.
Yeah. Most white parents stopped sending their kids to the school. The few white families who took a stand for integration paid a high price. Other white people blocked their path to the school, shouting and threatening to hurt their children.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So much love.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet they're all, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't really understand that at all.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
They even attacked their homes, breaking windows and throwing stones and rotten eggs. By December, school attendance had fallen from almost 600 students to fewer than 20. Ruby didn't even know there were other children in the school. She never saw them. Mrs. Henry did her best to help Ruby. She tried to explain integration. She told her that white people in the South were used to living a certain way, and they were having trouble changing. She explained that people were sometimes afraid of people they thought were different.
And that is true, because it does come from fear. And I am sorry that and that's something that I need to work on, because I get very angry and I get very upset, and it is something we need to change. But these people who held these beliefs and people who still hold the beliefs today, they need to be educated. They need to be understood. We need to meet them where they are. And we need to find out what is making them hurt so much and be so fearful. What is wrong? You know, they're wounded. They're wounded. And if we can help to heal them, I'm more concerned about the people that they're oppressing personally.
Yes,
but you know,
yeah.
Somebody can attend to them too. And if they can heal their hearts, then maybe they won't be so vicious.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Well, we hope, right?
We hope.
That's what we work for.
That's what we work for.
We really try to educate people and help them get along.
Right. And help them love themselves. And if you do everything out of love, if you try your best to be loving, then you can't go wrong. Yeah. Love has to be the motivator, not fear. Yeah.
As the months went on, Ruby began to feel lonely. She asked Mrs. Henry when she could see other children, but her teacher didn't know. That winter, Ruby began having nightmares. She had trouble eating, too. I knew I was just Ruby, she said later, but I guess I also knew that the Ruby who had to do it, go into that school and stay there no matter what those people said, standing outside. Finally, a few white children began coming back to school. The principal wouldn't put Ruby into a class with the other first graders, but she agreed to let them come to Ruby's class to visit. One of the kids refused to play with her, saying that his mom had forbidden him to because Ruby was black. At that moment, it all made sense to me, Ruby said. I remember feeling a little stunned. It was all about the color of my skin. Finally, that difficult year came to an end. The next fall, Ruby began second grade in a classroom with 20 other kids. Most were white, but there were a few black students, too. The protesters were gone, and so were the federal marshals. Progress had been made. Ruby Bridges hadn't chosen to be an activist, and the stress was hard on her and her whole family. Later, Ruby said she felt that she had lost her childhood that year.
Yeah.
I know, at so young an age.
Yeah.
But she showed incredible courage in a situation that would have been difficult and frightening, even for an adult. When she was older, she chose to continue working for justice and equality. She wrote a book about her experiences and traveled the country sharing her story, visiting schools, and talking to children about racism.
And that's the thing, Miss Jan, like we see all these beautiful children who come in here. Beautiful children. How could someone look at another child, at another human being, and not see the just the sacredness? The whether you're a spiritual person or not, just truly things can be sacred even to those who aren't, people of faith or whatever. You know what I'm saying? I'm totally, I totally know that. But like, dude, like life, human beings are sacred. Yes. Creation is sacred.
I have one more thing to say
about
this. This is so exciting.
Yeah.
Because she's still with us. She's
Yeah, yeah.
She lives in New Orleans. She has a husband and 4 sons, and she formed. It's called the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote the values of tolerance, respect, and appreciation of all differences.
See, and that's.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted to share too. I didn't have a chance to find this song, but there is a song by a woman called Lori McKenna called Ruby's Shoes.
Oh, yeah?
And there's a DVD about her in 6 of the libraries.
No way. We need to get that here.
Yeah, we don't have it, so.
Because you know what could happen? What could happen if someone's treated that way? If I would have been treated that way, I might have become very bitter.
You might have been a different
just
person.
Been like,
you might not
forget it. I don't want to, you know what I mean? I don't want to integrate with you either. I could have been very bitter. And Ruby Bridges had every right to be angry and mad and hold on to that.
There's so many barriers.
But look what she did.
Oh, she was amazing.
Dude. Yeah.
Yes, she is amazing.
She is amazing. Yeah, 1954, that's not all that.
Right.
I mean, she's not that old.
I'm 3 years younger than she is.
Okay, see? Exactly. Yeah. She's not that old at all.
Right.
Oh, thank you, Miss Jan. This was, again, a very emotional thing, but it's important that we tell the stories.
Yes, it is.
You know?
Come in looking for all the books that we have about Ruby Bridges. We have a lot.
Here, wait. Let me put that up here, and then people can go back and take a look at that, because we do have a lot of stuff, and it's just really important.
Yep.
It's really important.
All right.
Thank you, Miss Jan.
We're getting a little close to the end of the book.
All right, we're getting a little close to the end of the book. And you know what I hope and I bet could happen? Is that somebody, maybe a lot of people who are watching this out there, young people, are going to be in a book.
Oh, wouldn't
like
that be
that
awesome?
Someday. Because I have seen love and kindness in this community. I have seen love and kindness in this world. That's why when I hear things like this and see things on TV and see, like, it's a shock. It's a shock to your system too, but it's because it's so insidious.
They aren't the most of us.
I know.
They are the least of us.
In many ways.
Yes. That's what
and yes. Well, thank you, Miss Jan.
Thank you.
And let's keep trying to love and trying to be gracious to ourselves and to one another. And thank you for being the joy that you are and the light.
Oh, thank you. The next one's tough too.
Who's the next one?
Fighting to End Child Slavery.
Who's that?
I didn't look up the pronunciation.
Oh yeah, I've seen that name before, but I do not know. But we'll
need
find
to
out.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
And this is great. I'm learning so much.
Right,
even
exactly.
At my advanced stage.
Advanced
Me and Ruby.
No, that's cool. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Miss
thank
Jan.
you.
Bye.